Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started for the workshop for the South Walton Mobility. I just want to give you a quick little background on where we've been with this project so far, just to kind of give you some insight on that, and then I'll introduce Greg Darden with Structured Parking Solutions. Last spring, Structured Parking Solutions submitted an unsolicited proposal to the county for parking and mobility. And the Board of County Commissioners accepted that unsolicited proposal and in return put out an RFQ. And through that process, the RFQ, we had two submissions for that. Structured Parking Solutions was one of those firms that submitted and was ultimately selected by the Board of County Commissioners. And so right now we are in the planning phase with Structured Parking Solutions, and they will be presenting a plan back to the Board of County Commissioners in the beginning of December. So this is going through a process of public workshops, and like we have today. We'll also be talking about it at our Destination Improvement Committee at the TDC next week. And just FYI, if anybody would like to attend that, it is the 9th of November, next Thursday at 9 a.m. here at the Annex. And then to be determined, we are probably going to schedule another workshop since we had a couple of other county meetings that corresponded with this time and date. We will probably have a meeting on November 28th here at the Annex later in the evening. That's to be determined, so we will certainly put out a public notice in the paper and on the website. But we just want to make sure that we get feedback on this plan. And so just kind of, if you know anybody who would like to come to this meeting and they missed it, there are other opportunities for them to come and participate in this process. So anyway, back to Structured Parking Solutions. They have been working and meeting with community stakeholders. This is the first public meeting that we have where their plan will be unveiled, and we're looking forward to feedback from the community so we can make this a really good, solid plan moving forward. So unless there's any questions for me before we get started, I will turn it over to Greg Darden with Structured Parking Solutions.
Thanks, Jay. I guess it's a small group, so Jay, unless you have a problem, we kind of, if you have a question as we go through the slides, feel free to ask. I mean, we make this interactive because if it was a bigger group, we'd go through the slides first and then take questions. I tend to be animated. I believe in what I do, and sometimes I get to talking too fast. If I go too fast, do I need to be still? Sure. Okay. If I get to going too fast, or if you have a question, just slow me down or ask a question. This is, like I said, we're looking for your feedback. We're not trying to tell you things. We're trying to ascertain your thinking and what your thoughts are. So with that, let me turn my clicker on. As Jay said, I'm Greg Darden with Structured Parking Solutions. A little bit about our company before I get too far into this. Our company is based in Pensacola, Florida. Has four parent companies. One is Bullock Tice Architecture, one is P-Tech Engineering, one is Carson Lovell Companies, which is a property development and real estate company, and then the fourth is Carson Construction. Those four companies have had long-term experience with parking and mobility items, and when we conceptually built Structured Parking Solutions, it was geared as a not just parking, but parking and mobility company that was handling and dealing with and satisfying transportation needs in general. But we're the team leader. I'll go through that in a little bit more detail in just a moment, but I want to give you a little bit of background about our company and what we do. I'll also give out cards in a few minutes and put on the front table, so if anybody has follow-up information or questions for me that you want to talk about after this at a later date, you can get one of my cards. So if I walk around, Lisa, can you still hear me okay? Is that picking up?
I can hear you fine.
Great.
I just want to make sure that
so we want to first start off by telling you that we're here to talk about mobility. And mobility is not parking. Mobility is not shuttle. Mobility is not wayfinding programs. Mobility is all of these things. Basically, mobility is how humans move from place to place, and what do we need to do to satisfy and improve those movement and those activities. So I want to start by telling you first that we're here talking about mobility and how to improve mobility within the southern part of the county. The other thing I want to clarify on the front side is that these objectives are geared towards the southern part of the county. By design, we're working through the TDC, and the TDC's footprint basically starts at 98 on the southeast west of the county. So that's our defined scope of services that we're looking at, trying to create improvements The writing's a little bit small. You've got printouts. You can read this for yourself. I have to go to the don't read slides, but Jay kind of gave you a 10,000-foot view of what has happened so far. Some things that he didn't mention is that we've been, with us based in Pensacola, I've been coming to this part of the world for my entire life, visiting Destin, Sandestin, even the 38 area. Have a very good background in the area. The point, though, is we've been watching this system, and basically about a year and a half ago, after watching the activities of the county commission and press reports and whatnot, we felt like it was the right time to come in and suggest some improvements and concepts that we thought could benefit mobility and transportation issues in the southern part of the county. As Jay said, we did come in and offer an unsolicited proposal. That proposal was nothing more than a snapshot in time without us having the benefit to legally talk with the county or talk with anybody else.
I just checked, and we can barely hear you, so if you don't mind using your microphone.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so again, though, we after we were selected, or before we were selected, excuse me, we were doing our own analysis outside the scope of the county or anybody else. And then through an unsolicited proposal, we did offer the county a snapshot of what we thought some of these improvements could look like and how they could come forward. Again, as Jay suggested, the county thought that there was some merit in that. The next step of the process was a public solicitation, which we also followed through on and were ultimately selected. Since we were selected under the RFQ process, we've been working on our own, at our own accord, without any payment or contract from the county. And we've been doing other analysis and stakeholder meetings and whatnot. Essentially what we've done, and I'm setting a stage for the other slides, essentially what we've done is we've created what we call a conceptual master plan. This is a multi-year process of how to get from where you are now to making some initial improvements to planning for future mobility needs. And then from that master plan, we've pulled off a portion of those improvements, which we're suggesting is the first stage of implementation items. We'll get more into that in just a moment. So I'm one person of a tremendous team. The team that we've built for this project is one that we've used in other locations as well. It's my company, SPS. Volkert Engineering is part of our team. Volkert is a very successful transportation demand management engineering firm. They've worked with us on other programs, and they've worked outside of us on a lot of other programs solving mobility issues in the region. Lanier Parking is part of our team. They're one of the larger parking and shuttle operators in the southeast United States. Lord & Sons Construction, you may recognize them local. Jerry Pate Design. Jerry Pate's famous golfer based in Pensacola. He designs golf courses now, but a subsidiary division of his company is Jerry Pate Design and Architecture, and he is a very well accepted landscape architect, which we think landscaping is going to be an important part of things as we move forward. Beggs & Lane's handling legal consulting for us. And then CityLift is another one of our providers that we use and partner with for other alternative parking solutions. So before we actually dove into master planning considerations, our team always comes together. And what we do is we try to understand and create some edicts, some principles for each project that we want to adhere to. Again, not trying to read, you can read these, but I'm going to hit a few of these that we think are really, really important. We believe for this project that the focus needs to be on impactful and meaningful improvements. We need to focus on meeting current beach accessibility standards. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but really important we need to meet the current need, not necessarily provide additional need, but meet the current need that has been pent up, that hasn't been satisfied. We want to make sure that whatever we do also provides the platform for long-term beach accessibility. We want to make sure we focus on safety, focus on family-oriented principles and guidelines. One of the things that's made this area really successful is its dedication to family-oriented type developments and atmospheres. We want to create improvements that don't become obsolete. Really, really important. Transportation is shifting right now. How we use cars, how we interact with vehicles, where vehicles are going to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. We want to make sure that whatever we do now is not money that's poorly spent, but it's laying that foundation where it can be improved without becoming obsolete in the future. The next one really is close to my heart, sustainability and ecological sensitivities. We want to make sure that anything that we suggest and do doesn't back up all the great groundwork that this county's done to protect the dunes, to protect the ecology of the South Walton system. Sensitivity towards existing communities and citizens. We want to try to utilize existing infrastructure first and make improvements rather than recreating a new wheel. We want to use technologies for improvements. In many cases with transportation mobility, you can use technologies as opposed to spending large sums of money in building things. And then lastly, we want to make sure that whatever we do is adaptable to future and current trends. EV is electric vehicles, ride share, everybody knows ride shares, Lyft and Uber programmings, and then autonomous vehicles. We'll talk more about the autonomous vehicles as we get into the presentation. So once we had kind of our rules and principles that we wanted to adhere to, the next thing we did as a team is we developed a scope of services that we thought were important for us to hit upon as we considered the master plan and even the portion of the master plan that was the initial implementation needs. So I'm going to hit these just real fast. Obviously, parking is something that needs to be looked at. We feel very, very strongly about the movement towards a managed parking system. I think that everybody who lives here, who actually spends some time here, understands the stresses that are placed on the public parking system from very successful developments and very large retail or commercial footprints that may not have sufficient parking. A managed parking system helps control that. Shuttles, we are really, really big on shuttles, and in the long term, this is an elongated, urbanized model. People think of urbanized models as cities, and cities are very small and condensed. This is kind of an urbanized model, but it's elongated across the beachfront. The short of it is that shuttles are a perfect resource here that we think that need to be tapped and need to be utilized to help solve mobility issues. Pedestrian conveyances, that's the sidewalks, the greenways, the bike paths, etc. Those need to be looked at. They need to be considered. They need to be furthered, if you will, and developed as part of all master plans. Wayfinding signage program, we're moving a little bit less away from wayfinding signage and more into the next bullet point, which is the technological improvements. Somebody, I don't know if this is an accurate number, but somebody expressed to me that there were nearly 14,000 signs along 30A. That's an awful lot of signs for something that is such a landscaped natural feature. The signs just kind of get in the way, it creates clutter. So we were already thinking towards technological improvements like a phone-based application, and I think we're transitioning more into that and less into fewer wayfinding signages. Street improvements, security is important, and then public enhancements. So what is our long-range master plan? Essentially, these points give us the footprint and the guiding points of our long-range master plan that we've suggested. One is we need to continue to improve citizen access to the beaches. To give you some rough numbers here, the county currently has about 1,200 parking spaces in its physical inventory. We've done an assessment of all these. Those 1,200 spaces span from the west side of the county at Scenic 98 all the way to the east side of the county at Inlet Beach. You've got a full-time population of residents, homesteading residents, in excess of 60,000 people. You're the fifth, sixth largest or fastest growing county in the United States. You've got nearly 4 million visitors a year, and again, you've got 1,200 parking spaces. I'm not saying that you need to build 10,000 parking spaces and create additional congestion in the core 30A Scenic 98 area, but you have a pent-up demand that really needs to be met with additional parking. And that parking needs to provide flexibility to expand as the system needs to grow. Just as important as the shortages in parking are the transitions into remote parking rides. We feel very, very strongly about this. We feel like that you've got certain segments of your market, both in visitor traffic and perhaps in employee traffic, that is very conducive to park and ride concepts. where they're parking remotely and using shuttles to bring them into the core districts. We want to see that kind of transition. We want to make that transition into using parking rides as quickly as possible, but also as efficient and as meaningful as possible to the people who are using it. We want to expand the shuttle routes both for the public and the employees. The public using a shuttle and employees using a shuttle, those are two different user groups. They can be blended in some applications, but employees needing to get from a remote area to a place of work, they have a different schedule. They have a different set of needs. We understand that, and we're looking at the expansion of shuttles both for each of those two separate markets. Again, we want to promote ride share, bike share, and alternate forms of transportation. We want to improve the pedestrian and bike crossings. We've got a lot of crossings on 38 and Scenic 98 both where it's just unsafe. And not only is it unsafe, but these erroneous crossings are also causing congestion with traffic, where people are just crossing erroneously every 20 or 30 feet, and we've got to work on that. We want to dedicate, we'd like to develop long-term dedicated shuttle paths or right-of-ways, if you will. I'm not going to dwell on that too much. That's not part of the initial request for improvements. But our eyes are on that. We definitely want to focus on, in the future, some dedicated shuttleways. And then we also want to promote alternate forms of technology which enhance the mobility characteristics. So that's the global master plan. I know it says a lot, and it's a lot of fluffy words, but it does create the concept that lays the groundwork for how we're going to move forward with improvements for mobility in the future. So what we really want to talk about today is the portion of that master plan that we've targeted for, quote, an immediate or a recommendation for immediate improvements. The 6 areas that you see ballooned, the yellow areas, are areas of high concentration of use and needs that we've targeted, that we are recommending that we look at. So some of the surrounding communities along the Panhandle have not afforded some chances in the past. And what I'm talking about is that they've mass developed, they've allowed their properties to be mass developed, and there's just no inventory of property left right now. Walton County has a unique opportunity that we've pointed out to the TDC and to the commissioners. And that unique opportunity is there's still some very selective land masses that are still available. And it's our opinion and recommendation that the county, the TDC, should ascertain control of these spaces, not just to meet current needs for mobility that are pent up that have not been met, but to assure long-term success. We've been contacted by a neighboring city, if you will, beachfront, and unfortunately they've reached the point where there's just no property left to address their mobility concerns, and it's created some very difficult hardships for them. And we're trying to help them now, but they just don't have the same opportunity that you have here. So one of our first recommendations is to try to control what properties are smart and make sense to meet demand needs today, but again, apply and afford expandability in the future. We're going to address each of these spots now individually. Moving from west of the county to east, this is the Scenic 98 corridor. Pompano Joe's is in this area here. This is, if you're looking at the screens, you should see a red highlighter that's moving around. You already have an existing beachfront access parking lot here. The short of it is, in this area, we're targeting improvements to parking in this area that would equate to about 125 new spaces. And the area that we're targeting, again, is flexible for future growth as is needed. Some additional improvements that we're discussing as part of the initial offering is taking some of the spaces along this parking lot here and doing several things. One is creating some shuttle drop-off spots, but also creating drop-off spots for pedestrians. We want to make it more conducive and easier for people who are parking slightly away from the front beach parking accesses, make it easier for them to pull in, drop off their family, drop off their goods and supplies, and then walk a convenient distance, park, and then come back, and then reverse the cycle when they get ready to leave the beach. The other thing that we're going to look at with each of these sites not only is our shuttle and ancillary mobility capabilities, but also look at these parking locations and try to improve by deleting some parking spaces, but improve bike accessibility and also golf cart accessibility. Now, I'm not here to promote golf carts. That's somebody else's job to decide if they're legal or not. The short of it is that golf carts exist in this environment. And it is an absolute tragedy to utilize a full space vehicle parking location to put a golf cart. So until the golf cart situation is decided, are they in, are they out, they're here. And we believe that some very inexpensive restriping exercises can convert series of vehicle parking spaces, a few vehicles parking spaces, into many golf cart parking spaces. So these are a few of the concepts that's part of our, again, global initiative for the first phase. The next site, moving east, you may recognize this silhouette of the building as Amalfi Coast. There's an existing public beach access point here. Again, within the yellow district, if you will, we have a location that we're trying to consider up to about 180 new parking spaces there. Same improvements to the beachfront, the existing beachfront parking areas. We will make sure that we take care of golf carts. We will make sure we take care of bikes. And also, and I didn't mention this earlier, but we also are looking at handicap accessible parking as well and improvements for those. Continuing to move on, moving east, we're now into 30A. Here's the beginning of 30A. You may recognize this site. This is the Fort Panic Public Beach Access Point. This is the new, yet to be named Public Beach Access Point that was recently purchased. This is Hilltop Drive, and for lack of a better reference, this is the restaurant and lounge, the Stinky's facility. So this area, the TDC has already and even in the past areas, the TDC has been working on this, but the TDC is working on a number of right-of-way improvements right now that we think are really, really important improvements. They're transitioning what used to be sand right-of-way that was erroneously being parked into meaningful right-of-way parking, pavers, the curb system, and then landscaping. On top of what the TDC is already working on here, we think that if we're successful, we can add about 105 new parking spaces to this location. Continuing to move east, we're now into the 393 corridor, where 393 comes into 30A. This is Gulf Place development, as you probably know by now. This is the location for a new restaurant that's under construction now that should be opening soon. And then here's the public beach access point here. We have, I'll mention this property specifically, we have this piece of property under an option agreement right now. We're still doing evaluations, but because of some things going on at Gulf Place, because of just the success of this general area and this beachfront, we are suggesting at this stage, at this initial stage, the consideration for an actual physical garage at this location. If that is approved, then that garage could ascertain about 280 or so spaces. Be glad to answer questions on that if anybody's got any questions, but yes, sir, go ahead.
Relative to the garage, how, getting specific, how are they designed? Will they take urban issues into account? Because that's developing into quite an urban corner with the current Gulf Place, condition with the sidewalks and walkability. So will this just be a garage that will be adjacent or pulled away from the street, or will it not be lined with potential shops, or is any of that becoming considered more urban issues involved in this?
Right. All good questions. So first off, your current planning ordinance has a 50-foot height limit on this area, first off. Secondly, your planning ordinance also states that anything that's developed on 393 has to have an occupied use fronting 393. That's in your code now. So to hit upon your question, we are very inclined into developing and designing urbanized parking systems. And yes, most urbanized areas require, quote, liners. And for those of you who may not understand the terminology liners, The current concept for parking garages these days is for them not to look like the old gray ghost of past, if you will. They need to have character. They need to have architectural style, and in most areas, they're required to have some kind of liner or occupancy that shields or blocks the look of the facility from the public streets. That is the case here. Yes, we haven't done any design work, but we've studied it and we've done some preliminary footprinting and massing exercises. And the concept is that there would be an occupancy fronting the garage, or separating the garage from 393. Yes, sir. The architecture, what we have suggested is it would be architecture similar to Gulf Place. As related to the height, while first off, garages don't carry the same floor-to-floor height as a traditional building. Traditional buildings typically have 14, maybe 15-foot floor-to-floor heights. Parking garages usually have about 10.5-foot floor-to-floor heights. The point of that, though, is that our recommendation is not press the envelope and try to make this garage as big as it possibly can be. We're actually focused on about a 40-foot height structure, which is actually less than what most of Gulf Place is. So from a height scale and mass, yes, to answer your question, it would have an occupancy on 393, retail and other uses. Yes, it would not stress the code and zoning and max out height and ask for variances. It would actually be lower in mass and scale than what the adjacent buildings across the street portray as. So I hope that answered a few of your questions. Did I answer what you were asking for?
Yeah, I would also hope that our code doesn't prevent you from doing that.
No, we've looked at the code, and the last thing you really want to do with infrastructure is go in and ask a municipality to give a variance for its own needs against its own code. That's just not good business. So everything that we're doing is completely within code right now. Everything I'm suggesting is completely within code.
Are you guys, coordinating and relating to urban designers also? That seems to be a critical thing in spaces, and not just do landscaping and have engineers or anything, but we need people designing for pedestrians.
Right.
And walkability and there's certain aspects that go with making towns or places walkable, and that's certainly a corner of shit that can do that.
Absolutely. I agree. And at any given time, we have about 60 engineers on staff. We have about 30 architects on staff, roughly speaking. Yes, and we do more than just design. We do consulting as well.
I'm an architect, and I think we can kind of have a tendency to get honed in. I'm fortunate to work in all these great new urban towns along the VA, but we need to go back and do bigger picture sometimes too. So,
Agreed.
I hope you guys have somebody involved.
Well, let me hit the kind of process here. So the sites that we're showing you, none of them are etched in stone, and furthermore, the planned improvements, whether it's parking lot or a garage or whatever, are not etched in stone. And what we're asking the commissioners for is approval to move forward with portions of this. As far as each of these individual sites, we would end up having another series of stakeholder meetings just to talk about these individual sites as a planning process. So nothing that we're asking for is carte blanche, and we'd be going through the same permitting and planning process that any other project would be going through. So continuing to move east, we get into the 283 corridor and 30A. Grayton Beach is down in the southern portion of this map in the yellow area. This area is really underutilized and underparked to a lot of extent, but it's a favorite location for citizens and whatnot. Also, the county has already, or the TDC has already recently purchased this piece of property here, and it's a largely unimproved gravel parking lot, surface parking lot. It's about a 7-acre site. So our recommendation for this site as part of the initial offering, if you will, is to make improvements to that existing surface parking lot. We believe that we can go through some reallocation of the layout of it and get the space count up to about 180 spaces, make improvements to the wearing surface, better lighting, better landscaping, but essentially just make some tweaks to that existing surface parking lot. We also want to begin to expose the community, if you will, to shuttle here. And during peak season, we want to operate a shuttle between this parking lot and the southern end of the Grayton Beach community to try to get people more acclimated to park and ride. This is kind of a test bed for that project, or that portion of the project. And then secondly, we believe from past experiences that this parking lot is a good remote park and ride for employees. It's already been proven by some businesses who used this facility the past couple of years. And we want to start off with an employee shuttle that's running from this lot back to the east, back towards the Watercolor Seaside locations. Again, to try to start transitioning and get people into that mindset, in this case the employees, into remote park and ride. Continuing to move east, now we're into the Watercolor and Seaside districts, if you will. This is 395. We have this particular piece of property under an option right now, and it's a very large piece of property, larger than you probably need for any kind of mobility, but the good bad news is that a little over 90% of that property falls within a wetland. And the concept is that we take the portion that's wetland, subdivide it out, put it in a conservation district, and then donate it back, and it'd be used for citizens' use for parks, trails, whatnot. The very northern tip of that piece of property is still developable. It's up against Regions Bank, and what we're proposing there initially is nothing more than about a 75-space surface parking lot for the time being. In this location, you'd also have the employee shuttle coming in from the west from the 283 site, and then additionally, we would like to operate a seasonal visitor citizen type shuttle in this location to, again, transition those groups into more of a park and ride. Rather than getting in your car and driving over to one of the restaurants, Surfing Deer or whatnot, catch the shuttle. So I want to take just a second, and these are the sites, but I want to take a second and talk about the shuttle a bit more. One of the things that we've noticed is there's a lot of very good groups doing a lot of very good work in the county related to shuttle and mobility. And some of these groups are, they've got concepts to run shuttle up and down 331, which is important. And the short of it is that what we've tried to do in the past couple of months is the beginning of uniting these groups, our group and then the other groups, Seaside Institute and others. And the strategy is that rather than each of us working individually, let's pool our resources, let's pool our master plan, let's pool our time and effort, and then as a united, let's go to Tallahassee. And rather than this splinter groups asking for cash from the governments, whether it's the state or the federal government, let's pool our resources and work together. And we've already started those initiatives, and I'm very pleased to say that we've had very good conversations. Northwest Florida Regional Planning Council, Seaside Institute, and others. We're talking from the same page, and I think that this collective effort, not in this initial offering of needs and services, but as we transition into the next phase of the master plan, I think you'll see some real interesting benefits from us working together. Yes, ma'am.
What is the acreage here, the 395, 30A?
I don't have it at the top of my head. It's under 30 acres. It's about, top of my head, it's about 22, 23, 24, 25 acres, somewhere in that area. Approximately 10%, not very much.
Explain it to me. So what's going to happen with the wetlands?
Well, nothing is definitive. Our thoughts at this point in time is that the wetlands would be put into some type of conservation district and set aside for perpetuity and used for trails or whatever environmental and local needs that those groups think it would be best benefited for. That's outside the scope of my understanding. The point is that it's a large piece of property. A lot of it's unusable, and then rather than it just sitting there and fallow, let's put it in the hands of the professionals that know how to deal with that type of item. I mean, similar things have happened, from what I understand, with other conservation areas in southern Walton County. Let's find those resources and let's use that property for that benefit.
And you kind of answered a question I was thinking in my head. How are y'all working with the Seaside Institute, their mobility stuff?
We've had 2 meetings so far with Seaside, and all we've done is shared common thoughts, and we seem to be on the same page with strategy. We haven't gotten to the point yet where we actually have a united strategy. That's coming. This is still in its very beginning stages.
So there's 2 different RFQs. They've got one and you've got one.
Well, theirs is a request for cash, is what theirs is. It's a request for cash, and that cash would be used to study, as I understand it, would be used to study and propagate their desires for autonomous vehicles and other things in that part of the world.
No, there's also the clarification or rewriting of the current comp plan and land development code. So have you guys discussed anything with them or, for potential ease of making better right of ways?
Right. Okay. Understand that we're not under a hard contract yet. So everything I'm telling you, nothing is etched in stone. The purpose of this meeting today is just to give you our concepts, because we want your feedback to understand if we're heading in the right direction. A lot of this stuff that we're telling you, there's a lot of details to be worked out. But with that said and done, we have met with planning. We've had a couple of very good meetings. I think we share a lot of the same concepts. And we do have some suggestions as related to mobility. Once we're officially working with the county and the citizens, then our goal would be to offer some suggestions to comp plan and other improvements. Yes, sir. But you're exactly right. I mean, there's some very, very basic things that could be dealt with that would really help the environment and help mobility all the way around.
A lot of things in this, recently the Seaside Mobility Study, the movement last week actually, and so it's kind of difficult to hear all these people with different ideas, although similar. And I do think we need to pull together and come up with a great plan.
And that's our aspiration. We hope to do that. And that's part of we're willing to apply our resources and help be the cheerleader of whatever, but we really think you've got a great start. We just got to get everybody together. So, with all this said and done, at the end of the day, really what decides whether it happens or not are public acceptance and then how is it paid for. So this is infrastructure, fellas, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is infrastructure. And it's not private development. It's not, condominiums this is infrastructure. So historically, infrastructure is usually paid for by either cash or new taxes by the governmental entity that is overseeing the area where the infrastructure is built out. Even if the county uses or a municipality uses cash, that cash is generated through taxes. So at the end of the day, the only tool that government has for raising capital is taxation. We also have the TDC that we can look at for support, which is still a taxation, but it's a different kind of taxation. And then we have direct user payments. Lastly, we can combine all those, if necessary, and form some kind of logical combination of funding mechanisms. As far as the direct user payments, let me give you an analogy of that. I haven't done the research for your water and sewer system, but in general, most governmental or municipal water and sewer systems are paid for in two means. One is the municipality subsidizes some of the cost to treat that water or to treat that sewage. And then the balance of the cost to do that exercise is passed on by user fees, your water bill, your sewer bill. So it's a combination of the two. And inevitably, that's what we're suggesting here, is we're suggesting that there should be some kind of equitable solution where there's a combination of user fees and then perhaps some use of existing tax or cash, which we'll talk about more in detail in just a moment. So if you look at all of our suggested recommendations for the initial implementation ideas of the portion of the first portion of the master plan, at the end of the day, everything we just showed you, if all the stars align and we can actually pull all this off, you're looking at adding about 900 cars or parking spaces to your current system. Again, your current system is about 1,200 cars, so you're adding, just under 1,000. Again, that's still, if you look at, and I'm not trying to get you to compare yourself to other areas, but that's still a pretty low percentage of accessibility or parking spaces as compared to the size of the county, the growth factors, and other things. The second thing is that we're starting the public shuttle systems, both employees and for the general public. We want to develop a wayfinding phone-based application that facilitates both parking and shuttle activities. I love picking on Uber in a good way. Uber and Lyft, for that matter, revolutionized the taxi service. We all know what they did. But one of the things that a lot of psychologists have looked at that they did, that they really are getting great reports from, is that they created their phone-based application. And that removes that angst of waiting on that taxi. And I know that Uber, people don't call it a taxi, but it's a taxi. But that phone-based application allows you to look in real time where your ride is, and it removes that perception of where is he, where is he, where is she. So we want to build that same kind of technology here for a couple of reasons. One is that if you make a shuttle punctual, and if you make it free, hopefully, and if you make it where people know where it is and they can rely on it, they're more apt to use it. So we've got to remove all the obstacles, all the human element from the shuttle to make sure that it is accepted and it flourishes and grows. Same thing for the parking situation. We will make it where people can rely on it where parking is available, so they're not driving around erroneously looking for parking and creating more traffic. As I mentioned earlier in the program, that we really feel strongly about moving to a managed parking system. And our suggestions for this managed parking system, you can see it, you probably already read it in your printouts. But what we're suggesting from a price valuation, these are suggested prices during peak season. This is not off-season pricing. But during peak season, what we're suggesting is that the public parking spaces would be free to those who had access to parking for 0 to 30 minutes. It gives you the opportunity to order a pizza to go, drive in, pick it up. It gives you the opportunity to drive up to a public beach access point, pick up your family, not have to be worried about fees and fines, and load people up and unload them. The first hour is $2, and each hour thereafter is $1.50. And then what our suggestion was that a daily max of $15. Not trying to compare yourself with other systems, but one of the things that we did when we tried to create these rates and suggest these rates is we wanted to make sure that this system was not overburdensome to people who were visiting other systems. Destin, Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, even the Biloxi area. These prices, these rates are substantially cheaper than what people are experiencing in those areas. Lastly, we wanted to make sure that whatever we did was cognizant and respectful to the people who physically call Walton County home, physically live in the county. Not second home people, not third home people, but physically live in the county. And our suggestions, and we've done this in other areas, is that we would offer a county-wide citizen parking pass. $35 a year is what we've suggested. Again, these are our recommendations. $35 does not even cover the cost to administer the program, but it does place a value on that. It's not indifferent than the county charging some nominal fee for a dog permit to have a dog on the beach. It creates value, and it gives people a reason to protect and use the system. But nonetheless, the $35 is an annual pass. It does not guarantee citizens a parking space, but if one is available, they have it for free. So it makes it a little bit easier for the folks to have access to the parking. The next slide, I want to take just a minute and remind you, for those of you who don't understand, we would theoretically be working under the TDC. The TDC works for the BCC. So the TDC takes on a lot larger role. I think most of you probably understand what the TDC does, but I'm going to take just a second and tell you, it's not just tourism. They handle all beach operations. And Jay can probably speak better than this, but it's my understanding through my own investigation that the TDC's already reinvested a little bit under $10 million recently with improvements to beach accessibility and whatnot. So the reason I bring that up is that the parking program that I just suggested to you does not pay for itself. We're still working on budgets right now, but the TDC is stepping up and saying that under the right circumstances to be determined, the TDC has interest in considering covering those additional costs. So what would happen is that this situation would not be a new tax. It would not be money taken out of county coffers. It would be utilization or redeployment of existing TDC cash flow. So with that said and done, at this point in time, we want to get your feedback. Jay, I'd like to ask you a minute. Did I miss anything? Did I misspeak? Was there something that you would like to address?
No, that's it.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Well, first, this doesn't address the neighborhood accesses at all, does it? It's just these particular places.
Right. So let me stop you right there for. Let's catch that because that's a good question. The county doesn't have jurisdiction inside the individual communities. Those are, for the most part. Go ahead.
No, I'm not talking about a private one.
Okay.
But the county, correct me, Jay, on this, but, there are some accesses in Baldwin County that are public accesses,
Mm-hmm.
but they're sort of categorized as a neighborhood versus a regional access.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of my question. Those, for instance, the Stallworth access, that's a neighborhood access.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there's two of them. One of them has a small parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
One of them has inadequate bike parking, which I've said for years, and we'll correct that.
Right.
So this obviously doesn't address that at all.
It when you say doesn't address it, are you saying doesn't encompass those areas?
Correct. Does not encompass what is the TDC is categorized as neighborhood access.
It actually would encompass those areas. This program would encompass every single parking location that the county owns, which are all the public access points within the full stretch of the scenic 98 and 38 area. Yes. So what's, in my opinion, it's my opinion now, while you do have those public beach, small one-off beach areas with a few parking spaces in it, I would dare say that during peak season, and you tell me if I'm right, that those spaces are largely fully occupied.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
You know, what I call the drop-off situation.
Right.
It creates kind of a mess down
Right.
there. So, and one of the reasons in my mind, I was thinking, I said, well, if the pay system is only the large regional accesses, I would guarantee that people will bypass them and they're going to go down to the neighborhood access
Right.
and park where they can for free.
And you're spot on.
I can't wait to hear what some of my neighbors think about the place they've been parking for 20 years they're going to have to pay. I ride my bike, so cars are not an issue for me.
Right.
However, I'm just thinking of all these things that
Right.
are going to be issues.
So let's kind of play on that concept. It's a good conversation, great conversation. So we all know that even in the one-off, not the major planned communities, but even in the smaller communities, there are rental properties. Agreed?
Well, the particular access that I'm considering, that one neighborhood south of 38 prohibits rental.
Okay.
But they do allow on the north side, there's not a
Right.
lot.
Well, I mean,
They come
without
from other
right.
areas.
Generally speaking, there's a large propensity of rental property in the area, generally speaking. And you can't have a hose pipe half turned on, either it's on or it's off. And my point is that being cognizant and respectful of the situation that you described, we still need a management system, because that management system helps assure that the homes that have 3, 4, 5 bedrooms and 1 or 2 parking spaces are not using, which they've been doing for years, gaming every other parking spot that's available outside their own property for parking those cars. So while you're right, this system to be managed, it's got to be managed. It's a hard managed system, but it does give the ability for those smaller one-off areas, for those residents, if they want to buy a $35 a year parking pass, then they can still park in those locations. Yes, it provides a pass, but what it also provides is the assurance that if that vehicle doesn't have that parking pass, it's being charged a at-rate fee, and if it doesn't do that, then it's being fined. So our goal here is to really try to reinforce and protect the parking spaces that are the county parking spaces for the visitors and the citizens. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay, so it would be comprehensive to the neighborhood
Yes, ma'am.
accesses, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm just throwing this out here because I've seen it. It's not like I'm making this up, I've seen it.
No,
So
right.
what people will do, is, again, they will, in that access, and I've seen others, along 38, they drop people off and then leave.
Right.
And then go park up on 38 and one guy walks down, so it creates a real weird traffic situation on 38. So the parking spaces that are currently being built on 38, those will also be a fee-based parking, or is it only gonna be the lots? All that's gonna be fee-based parking?
Yeah. And, you know, and again,
Do you charge for light slots?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd like to see those increase at every place, because what happens is, there are people that, particularly I see it at my walkover, and I love this, people will load their kids, and, you know, you got the little
Right.
kid carriers, they'll load their stuff, their kids will ride their bike, and one family will take up the whole bike ride. And that happens constantly.
well, we want to promote the bikes. So no, bikes aren't charged. No, you don't charge for bike parking. No, that's, and you increase the bike parking. I mean, you may lose 2 or 3 parking spaces because look, the purpose for the parking fees, if you will, is not to make money. It's to force a behavior. That's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to force a behavior. If you want to make the parking accessible for the citizens and the visitors, and at the same time, you want to try to, through performance-based parking standards, you want to try to push people into using bikes, using shuttles, and using drop-offs as opposed to trying to park in the front door of the beaches.
Okay. One more thing related to this. So Jay, this is kind of a question for you. So is the TDC or the county, whoever, going to charge people to park at the county accesses, yet is the TDC still going to pay the state parks to let people in for free?
That's to be determined.
Okay, because I can see where people are like, hold on,
That's
y'all are giving money to these people, yet you're charging me. And I don't care how rich somebody is, they don't like to be charged for stuff, you know?
Well, and it's something that we need to talk about, because if we're offering paid parking in one place and free parking in another, then we can inundate the parks with people for free parking. So
Right.
it's something that we need to look at.
Agreed.
Greg and I have talked about it initially. We'll have to talk about it some more. So,
But you see, the thing is, but it is, so what I want to say, kind of hypocritical for the TDC to want to charge someone who wants to go to one particular beach, yet fork out money for people who want to go somewhere else.
Well,
You know, it's so a little bit inequitable.
Right.
That's my opinion.
so we hadn't talked about this, and I'm gonna make a comment, my personal comment. I think that the TDC was doing an incredible job. They didn't have the tools to expand parking, and the mobility program wasn't defined, and they did what they had to do. I think it was a great effort, because it
I'm not being critical.
right.
I'm just pointing out the facts.
Yeah.
it's on our radar. We'll talk about it. And so it's something that we're going to address. It's a conversation we have with the state parks folks as well. So we're working on all that as we go through this process. So, but it's something we are aware of. We have, like I said, we have to talk about that.
Yeah, as a citizen, I would be a little bit unnerved. I've got to pay for something here that's convenient for
Right.
me to go, but I can do it free inconveniently. That's just not, it doesn't sit well.
Well, it's counterintuitive to what we're doing here. So I agree. I agree with your comment. You're spot on.
I'm gonna be the first one to say.
No, you're spot on. Anybody else have a question or comment? Yes, sir.
The workforce development issue. Our servers who work in retail and restaurants, they need to be questioned about what they would like. I think the irony here is they're our customers, because they're our lifeblood.
Mm-hmm.
So the employee parking, mixing it in with tourist parking and citizen parking seems to defeat the purpose. If we're gonna, why don't we take the employees parking, if they're coming from north of the bay? Now, they do come from 98, east and west, I understand. But we need to know where exactly they're coming from. If we're coming down 331, then let's move the parking lot up there. So that then you get a shuttle
Preaching to the choir.
I understand.
Finish up, finish up.
You move it north, you take the Seaside Institute recommendation, put an electric bus in it. Right now, we're building a bridge at Big Redfish. As you or Seaside Institute talk to the DOT planners
So,
to widen that bridge while we're building it?
So, yeah, let me get caught up with some of the things you're saying. First off, I agree with your concepts, and that's part of our long-range master plan. You've got to walk before you can crawl. I mean, you've got to crawl before you walk, excuse me, and walk before you can run. And what we're trying to do with this initial grouping of offering, we're not being insensitive what you said. I 100% agree with what you just said. But the first, our recommendation is that you've got some properties available. You need to latch onto them while they're still available for public use, and then use those properties in a smart manner now, and then start building towards the future, and not build something that's obsolete. Now, with that said and done, there was some DOT initiatives that were put out a couple of years ago, where DOT wanted to propagate ride share for employees up on 98 and then bring them in. And we're beginning to dust those off. Those initiatives just never did gain any traction. Nobody stepped to the plate. We're dusting those off right now. And I fully agree with you. I mean, the overall concept is that there would be one group, and I'm not prepared yet to say who it is, but one group would be bringing individuals down 331, and then they would be dropped off on 98 at various park and ride locations where they catch the smaller shuttles and ride into the core. This is the same principle that most cities use. Those who've been to Atlanta before, MARTA system's been very, very successful. And you've got the trains and the long route buses that run the periphery, and you catch one of those and you get on a different bus, and then you ride the smaller bus into the core. I agree. That's the direction we want to go. We've got to take care of these initial items first and then quickly transition to that. But I fully agree with your comments.
And do we know where our employees are coming from? What's the origin?
They're coming from Freeport and Virginia.
There are some that are coming from east and west routes. Well, that's part of what the studies that have got to take place before you move into park and rides. Again, that's why that programming is not part of the initial action, because we haven't had a chance to study that and work as a collective group, Seaside Institute, us, and others, and gather in Northwest Florida Regional and gather that kind of due diligence to make the smart decision. But our approach is the same approach that you're suggesting. Absolutely. So I wish I had the answers, but I'm not going to make something up for you. We don't have the answers yet. But our direction's the same.
Crawling before we walk.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you had asked about us soliciting input, and we are going to be sending out a survey to locals to get feedback on this program. And so what we'll do is we'll be emailing and phone calls, pushing people to a website where they participate in a survey. We haven't got it quite worked out yet on your own questions. There will probably be a dozen, 15 questions just asking people about ride share and if they use it, and parking lots, and just use it, how much you use it during the seasons. And so lots of questions, but we are looking to get feedback from the community, just like we're having this workshop now. But we're going to take it one step further and actually deliver a message to your inbox via email and say, hey, we participate in this survey.
But in addition to that, specifically on the employees, we'll have to get into the major employers. They track their employees. They know pretty much where they're coming from. Seaside's got a wealth of information about their employees base. And we've had conversations and meetings with Pam, the manager at Seaside. They've got that information. Met with Alice Beach this week. They're beginning to develop that kind of information. We're going to have to develop all that information from these major employers to understand where the bulk of the employees are coming from. Then we'll have the data to start building out those programs. Anybody else? Somebody. We're scheduled for 2 hours. You can't leave for another hour, so you might I play.
It's funny, it's specific. You talk about like street design, infrastructure design itself, and I mean, I'd hate to see us focus on movement of automobiles alone. So, what is the emphasis of pedestrianism and walkability? Are we going to have different criteria depending on locations and so on?
can only speak to my comments, I mean, again, this is still conceptual. Nothing is etched in stone. But when you look at 30A, the county has done a great job of, of building out bike paths and whatnot, but they still are crossing.
We need more. I mean, they cross it really awkward.
It is. So, I mean, if you're asking for my opinion, 10 years out, 15 years out, I mean, I think that a dedicated east-west shuttle lane, I think that's a no-brainer, my opinion. I can't promise that. I don't know if anybody else shares my opinion, but my opinion, I think an east-west shuttle lane, contiguous shuttle lane, you don't ever run one shuttle east to west across 30A. It's 20 miles. Nobody'd ride it. I mean, it'd take them an hour to get from one side to the other, but you have interconnecting shuttles, so you can jump off and get on the next one, and so on and so on. But my opinion, yeah, I think a contiguous east-west shuttle would be perfect. I think that a common bike and pedestrian way on the north and or south side would be perfect, and it removes those erroneous crossings.
We don't develop standards for the street to show graphically and how it's going to relate to the buildings and the intersections.
Right. Well, the county actually went a long way. For the biggest part, there's a 60-foot right-of-way around 30A for the biggest part. So, I mean, the right-of-way's there. There's two questions: how to best utilize that right-of-way. Well, three questions: how to utilize it, how to deal with the encroachments that are existing in the right-of-way, and then third, how to pay for it. So that's something that's close to my heart as well. But again, that's something we're going to have to start having committees and studying it and create a vision, and then work through planning to put that vision on master plans, and that's what we're working towards. But I think I understand that your question and your suggestion, and I can't give you an argument. I agree with that.
For example, the improvements that are happening at the community development section, I personally think there's a mistake, and I think we'll be correcting that in 20 years.
At 395 and 38, I haven't had the opportunity to look at that. I mean, that was already going when we came into the picture, and I really don't even know what they're planning there yet. I hadn't looked at that.
It seems like a very suburban type off ramp to a little corner like golf places. I think this is going to be more urbanized.
Mhm.
So the two don't seem to mix very well at some point in time.
Okay.
So it'd be nice to see as you guys progress, develop some infrastructure standards.
Well, I give you, for example, we worked with in Pensacola, the Pensacola Island Authority, or the beach at Pensacola is under the jurisdiction of the Island Authority. The city has nothing to do with the beach; it's the county. And essentially, years ago, as I understand it, the military donated that island, Okaloosa Island, if you will, or parts of the island, to the county, or to two different counties, Okaloosa and Escambia. Anyway, the portion that's in Escambia County, which is in Pensacola, you come across the last bridge and you hit Casino Beach. And anybody who's been out there, it's just a weird combination of intersecting streets. And our engineers have worked with the county, and we just have been approved to put in a series of roundabouts and remove all of those intersecting crazy roads. So yes, we do have the planning capability and experience on the team to address these urban issues, whether it's a roundabout or whatever. Anybody else? So I'll hang around. If anybody's got any questions they want to ask one off. Jay, you may have a few words to say, but again, we're trying to do this in the light of the public, and we really want to hear your comments and your suggestions. We may have missed something. We're human also. And we want to make sure that if we are fortunate enough to move forward with these exercises, we've got the buy-in of the community, because without your buy-in, this is a meaningless exercise. So, tonight, tomorrow, if you think about something, I'm going to put my cards out. My cell phone is on that card. I will tell you right now, I very rarely answer it, because 90% of the time I'm doing this kind of stuff right here. But at night, the next morning, I'll call you back. So send me an email, leave me a voicemail, whatever. But we do want to hear from you. Lastly, if you hear anything other than what you've heard today on the street, call me or correct the person. We're trying to make sure that the right information's out there, the accurate information. And what we've told you today is exactly what our thoughts and wishes are. So help us out, okay? Other than that, thank y'all for coming. Jay, did you want to say anything in closing?
I'm just going to recap the subsequent meetings, just in case someone
Sure.
came in a little late after we got started. So just real quick, just wanted to reiterate what I said in the beginning, just in case someone came in a little late after we got started. We are having Greg will do the presentation again at the Destination Improvement Committee, 9 a.m. next Thursday here at the Annex. And then we're looking at scheduling another workshop in the end of November, most likely the 28th. But like I said, that's to be determined. Once we can confirm the availability of the room, we'll do a public notice in the paper, and then we'll have it on the county website. So if you, as you talk to your friends, neighbors, coworkers, what have you, and they have an interest in this, let's say, hey, there's other opportunities for public workshops coming up, definitely get out there, be involved, give your feedback to the county. It's important. I mean, this is a big deal. It affects all of us here in Walton County. So, and we want to make sure that we get feedback from the community. It's really important. The Board of County Commissioners, they want to hear from you. And now's the time for them to get input as Greg and his team work to put a plan together to present to the board. It's important that we get feedback along the way. So when they're presenting this in December, we know we're in a really good spot as we're moving forward. So anyway, unless there's any other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap this up for the evening. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.